Hello and welcome to Sunshine for Your Life. Today I'd like to start off with a story about my father. My father had a tremendous sense of humor. He just could laugh a lot and do pranks. He just had a wonderful time, and he was a great father. And he became friends with a manager of a Western auto store, and the manager's name was Tony, and they became great friends, and he would go into the store frequently, and a lot of times they'd play jokes on each other. A lot of times they would have arguments with each other, and the arguments were fake. They weren't angry at each other, but they were just having a good time, and it was a joke. I've seen people go into the store and they got really upset because they were arguing, and they were arguing loudly, and they were saying stupid things, and then one of them would laugh because they just couldn't hold it back any longer, and they both kind of collapsed laughing, and people would realize it was nothing but a joke. I've seen my father chase Tony, the manager's name was Tony, all around the store. I'm going to get you, I'm going to get you. No, you won't. I can run faster than you can. And on it went. And usually my father took me with him. And it was just, I was just a child, but I knew about the jokes and everything, and I enjoyed it too. I could remember one time my father went in and complained. He appeared to be very angry. You have very bad paint. You sell inferior paint in this store. I don't want to ever buy any more paint in this store. And then Tony would say, well, how come? What's wrong with the paint? I only sell top quality stuff. And my father would say, your paint came out backwards. When I took the paint out of the can and tried to paint my house, it came out backwards, and I ended up by painting my house upside down. Well, by the time you get to that point, they just could not contain their laughter anymore. People thought they were nuts until they started laughing, and then they realized it was a joke. Well, one day, my father went in to the store, and I was with him as usual. I usually was. And he said, your paint is so inferior, I don't even dare to buy it anymore. And he was just pretending to be so angry. And Tony, as usual, was asking, what is wrong with this paint? I sell only high quality paint. This is ridiculous. You should know that I only sell high quality paint. And on it went. And people were getting a little, edgy about it. And finally my father said, I wanted to paint my house plaid. I came in here and I wanted to buy plaid paint. When I got the paint out of the can, it wasn't plaid at all. What's the matter with you? Don't you even have good quality plaid paint in here? Well, by that time they were laughing so hard, everybody knew it was a joke. I was laughing, and it was just a tremendous thing. So this is the way he was. And I can remember driving around a lake one day, and I was just so amused because I saw on the edge of the lake a house, and it was painted plaid. Yes, there was such a thing as a plaid house. Nobody would have believed me. So in case that you don't believe me, I have brought in a picture which I'm going to hold up, and it is a cottage by a lake, and it's been painted plaid. So let me hold this where I think you'll be able to see it. If you look carefully, I've got two pictures here, and the picture on top shows by the porch area, and you can see the side of the house, and it is painted plaid, and there's a little window on top of the house, and there's a little plaid area around the window. Basically it's yellow, but there's a little plaid area around the house. And on the bottom, which will be clearer, this is the whole back side of the house, and it's been painted plaid. Very beautifully done. All the squares are perfect. Yellows, greens, it's just marvelous. So when I found out that there really was a plaid house, I took pictures of it. I went back a few times, took pictures of it, and then I gave them to my father and took my father out so he could see that there really is such a thing as a plaid house. Now, so the cottage exists, but right now, I've been by once in a while. I've been by once in a while, and the house is just plain white now. But it was a multicolored house, and what it reminded me was of the story of Joseph and his multicolored coat, because his father had made him a multicolored coat. I'm going to start off by reading Genesis 37. I'm taking it from the King James Version. Genesis 37 verses 3 and 4, although basically verses 3. Now Israel, God's new name for Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. So Joseph was probably about 17, he was probably a teenager, and he had something that his brothers didn't have. He had that multicolored coat. Now when you see it depicted in drawings, they usually show it as having stripes. It's like stripes of different colors, but the Bible doesn't say it was even striped with many colors. It just says it was a multicolored coat, and it was probably very beautiful. It was a one kind of a coat, but what it signified to Joseph and what it signified also to his brothers is that he was more important. He was loved more than they were. Now, partiality in a family just doesn't go. It's not fair, it's not good. And I can imagine as a 17-year-old or about that age, he could have become very arrogant about that coat. See what I've got. And every time he wore it, it was a reminder that he had something that his brothers didn't have. So it was not probably the best idea for him to have something and for that partiality to be shown. But nonetheless, he did have this coat. But Joseph also had other things going for him. He started having dreams. And in his dreams, he dreamt that people would look up to him. People would bow down to him. He would be dominant somehow, somewhere. He would be dominant. And as a result of that, he would be more important. He would be able to be over, either in a political sense or a religious sense. He would be over other people. He would be more important. He was going to ascend. He was going to be somebody that's more important than others. Now, his parents, his brethren, they all argued with him about it and basically told him, do you really think we're going to bow down to you? We're not going to bow down to you. You're just like us. But he insisted upon those dreams. He knew those dreams were true. And other things happened to Joseph as well. Joseph went to check on his brothers. They were herding sheep, and he went to check on them. And they were so jealous that they took his coat off. They put him in a pit where he couldn't get out, and he could have died in that pit. Then they took him out of the pit, and they sold him to a slave trader and took him to Egypt, where he would be a slave. Now, if you can imagine the horror of that. First of all, Joseph loves his father, he loves his family, and of course he's not going to see him, as far as he knows, he's never going to see them again. And that's a horrible thing to go through, the pain of the loneliness of being taken away from your family and not having anything to say about it, not being able to change it in any way. And the brothers were lying. They took his coat, they killed an animal, put the animal's blood on the coat. Then when they went back from their sheep herding responsibilities, they presented the coat to his father and said that he was killed by an animal. And because he believed it, he had the coat, there was blood on the coat, he thought he'd lost his son, the one that he loved the most. And so for him, he was in a real state of grief. Eventually, the brothers got into a real state of guilt because of what they did. They lied. They separated this boy from his father. They had him sold into slavery, and they lied to the father. Well, what could be worse than that? That is really not good. I just can't imagine my own family. I'm from a kind of a close-knit family, and I can't imagine any one of us doing anything like that to the other one. I have a twin sister and I have a younger brother. He's passed on now, but he was 5 years younger than we were. And I can't imagine growing up. There was no jealousy between us. There was no favoritism. No one ever asked any questions as, did you get more for Christmas than I did? Did Mom and Dad pay more for your gifts than they did for our gifts? We just didn't care. That wasn't the way our lives were. We were close. We were happy with each other, and if we had a lot of gifts or if we had few gifts, it really didn't matter. We were not jealous, we were not antagonistic, we were not trying to be more important than the other one. We were a very close-knit family. Now, when in Egypt, Joseph was accused by Potiphar. He was a slave to Potiphar. He was like the king of Egypt. And he was accused by Potiphar's wife of raping her, which was not true. He did not do it. But he ended up in prison. But in prison, he was found to be able to interpret dreams. And so the dreams that he had indicated that there was going to be a famine, a 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And when it was realized that he could interpret those dreams, he was put in charge, and he was very high up in the Egyptian government, and he built all kinds of storage barns where he prepared for famine by collecting food, so that when the famine came, he could give food to people and they would not starve. There would be enough to carry them through those 7 years of famine. And he was very good at it. Now, eventually, of course, the brothers had to go to Egypt to get food because they had the famine too. And the only way that they knew how to get food was to go to Egypt and to approach him and ask for food, which they did on numerous occasions. And he always gave them food. And they did not recognize him, but he knew who they were. He recognized them. And so on their trips, they kept talking about, why has this befallen us? Why are we in such a state that we have to go to Egypt to buy food? And they discovered, and as they talked about it, that, you know, it's our fault, because what happened is we lied. We had Joseph sold into slavery, and we lied to our father about it. Our father thinks he's dead, and we were deceptive. And they started to realize what they did was a terribly bad thing. And so, and Joseph is listening to them talk, and they don't realize he understands them. They don't know who he is. He is aware of who they are. So Joseph put them to the test, and he accused him of stealing, because a younger brother had been born, and he wanted to see the younger brother. So he put them to the test, and finally he admitted to them that he was the brother. He admitted to them that he was the one that they had sold into slavery. So Joseph said to his brothers, and he dismissed all his staff, and he started crying and weeping. I guess he wept very, very deeply. And on Genesis 45:3, a verse that I'm going to read to you now, and it comes from the King James, he says, "I am Joseph. Does my father yet live?" See, he still wanted to see his father. His father was alive. And he explained to his brothers that he had been sold into slavery. He worked for Potiphar. He'd been put in charge of getting food because he had the ability to interpret dreams. His dreams actually came true. They did have to, he did ascend over them. He was in charge of them. He saved the Israelis. He saved the nation, because he was able to feed them. Otherwise, they would have starved. Now, you just stop to think. What happened to Joseph was terrible. They sold him into slavery. They told his father he was dead. And he was not the least bit angry at him for doing that. You know, when he explained it and they started feeling guilty, he said, "Don't even be grieved that you did this, because God was in it. God was in it, because otherwise that famine would have come and everybody would have died. Because I had the ability," I'm talking like I was him now, "because I had the ability to interpret the dreams, I knew the famine was coming. And I was able to prepare for it. So I am not angry at you for what you did. I believe it was a part of God's plan to send me here to spare you, to spare my family, to spare the Israelis, and also to spare Egypt, because this was a very, very far-ranging famine, and many, many people lived that would have died had he not been put in charge. So he had to get to Egypt in order to do this. He could have still had the dreams, But if he was in Israel and he was with his father or he was with his brethren, he still could have had the dreams, but he would not be in a position to do anything about it. But because he had a high position in the Egyptian government, he was able to do something about it. He was able to build storehouses and have all kinds of food ready. So when 7 years came of famine, there was enough food to feed everybody. So he had to build massive structures, and he had to build those structures to hold massive amounts of grain so that in 7 years nobody starved. You stop to think of how much food you eat even in a week. You stop to think about the snacks you have every day, the meals that you have every day, the cups of coffee that you drink every day, if you drink coffee, you know, going out for a soda, going out for a snack, going out for a dessert somewhere, meeting a friend for lunch. And then you think of all of this food that you consume over a 7-year period. If you were to look at it in terms of a 7-year period, it's a massive amount of food, even if you're on a diet. Now, I saw something interesting on television this morning. There was a lady who only has eaten 3 things her whole life. She just can't stand the texture of food her whole life. She's, I'm going to guess in her 20s. And she feels healthy and she feels good, but the only thing she ever eats is potato chips, milk, and potatoes. I think that's it. She won't eat fruits. She won't eat vegetables. She has some kind of a psychiatric disorder where food just turns her off, but she loves potato chips. She eats a bag of potato chips every day. I can't imagine the salt and the fat and all of that, but she eats a bag of potato chips every day, and she eats French fries and different types of potato, and she drinks milk. And she has lived her whole life. Even as an infant, she wouldn't eat fruits or vegetables. She just couldn't stand it. The texture of the food. It is some kind of a psychiatric disorder that the American Psychiatric Society is thinking of diagnosing it and putting in its DSM, its statistic and manual book that diagnoses psychiatric disorders. But that's all she's ever had. But supposing that you only ate potato chips for 7 years and glasses of milk for 7 years and French fries, that's still an awful lot of food. But Joseph was able to take care of them all because he was put in charge. So his brothers, he sent for his father. They moved to Egypt. He took care of them. The family was united again. But what it means to me is the fact that no matter how bad things got for him, God always put him on top, and those dreams of him were right. When Potiphar, wife, accused him of rape, he was put in prison. But he was a model prisoner, and he got to the top levels of the prison. And then it was discovered that he could interpret dreams. He was out of prison and in Potiphar's court and head of the government, one of the heads of the government, to preserve the people. So even though they planned something that was horrific and awful, and God couldn't have been couldn't have encouraged that. They did that on their own. God used it. I don't think God makes bad things happen, but I think he uses whatever happens to us for his glory and for our good, and also for the good maybe of the people around us. This is the thing that you have to remember. The fact that whatever happens to you, it can be awful, but in the end, it turns out to be good. You know, the Bible does say that all things that happen to us work out for good according to those who are, like, let me see if I can think of the whole thing. All things work together for good to those who are called according to God's purpose. That's what the verse actually says. And so if you are in some kind of a bad situation and things are not good for you, it can somehow, if you're a Christian, turn around for your good. And you need to remember that. Because God is always out for your good. He is not out for your harm. And yet a lot of things happen to us that are harmful. A lot of things happen to us that are bad. But at the same time, God works it out so in the end, it helps us in the end. It helps us to be more understanding of other people. It works. God works it to his glory. He works it to our benefit. We turn out to be better than we were before, stronger than we were before. All things work together for good, for those who are called of God, who are God's. And you need to remember that he is for you, he is not against you. And the horrible things of Joseph that he went through did turn out to help him, did put him in a position where he could save his family, where he could save his loved ones, where he could save his nation and could save the Egyptians too. So, and he had no resentment, which is another thing that you need to remember. He had no resentment, no grief, no anger, no, I'm going to show them I was right all along, and they're going to have to admit that. There was no arrogance in him at all, because he grew as well. In his years away from them, he grew as well, and they grew too. They recognized their guilt. He forgave them, and that's one of the tenets of the Christian faith. So I'm going to close it here because we're getting close to the end. I didn't quite finish, but I've taught you enough. So, and I want you to think about the things that I say. If there's anything that you want me to talk about, you can always email me at the station, and I'll take it into consideration. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please join me next time.